Some loves never die. They just lie dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Returning to this city after so many years was like opening an old book and smelling the memories embedded in the pages. The streets, the houses, the square where we used to play. Everything seemed smaller, but the weight of nostalgia made every corner carry a memory. I came back because my grandmother needed me. Her body was no longer the same, and she needed constant care. I didn't think twice before leaving my life in the big city and returning to this place that was once my home. But I knew that being here meant facing ghosts from the past. One in particular. John, my childhood best friend, my first love, my first everything. I learned that he still lived here, that he had gotten married, built his life. I tried to convince myself that it was just a name, just one face among so many from my past. But it only took one meeting to prove me wrong. It happened in the market, in a banal and painfully intense way at the same time. I was grabbing a bag of coffee when I heard that voice, a voice that had once been my favorite song. It can't be. I turned slowly, as if any sudden movement could break the moment. And there he was, João. More of a man, more mature, but still him. The same eyes that once saw me as if I was the only thing that mattered in the world. My heart stumbled to its own rhythm. He smiled, that smile that always disarmed me, but now it had a different weight. And there, in that brief second, I realized that some feelings don't go away with time. They hide. They wait. The problem was, he wasn't mine to love anymore. He took a step forward, and I stood there frozen, trying to process everything that this encounter meant. João looked at me as if he were seeing a ghost, as if I were a piece of the past that he never expected to find again. My God. Is that really you? His voice had a hoarse, surprised tone. I nodded, trying to smile. But my heart was pounding so hard, it was hard to keep it natural. He was still as beautiful as I remembered. Shorter hair, more defined features, and those eyes. Eyes that had already seen me naked in every possible way. In my soul, in my skin, in my feelings. Time has passed, huh? My voice sounded weak, almost a whisper. He laughed, and something inside me trembled, because that laugh was familiar, but also strange. Familiar because I remembered entire afternoons we spent together, laughing at silly things, making plans for a future that never happened. Strange because now he had a life that I was no longer a part of. And how did it go? He watched me with a different glow in his eyes. I heard you went away to college and never came back. I'm back now, for a while. My grandmother needs me. He nodded slowly, seeming to choose his words. I'm glad to see you. In truth, happy. The word hit me like a punch in the stomach, because at that moment, I realized that there was still something there. Something unresolved. Something that time did not erase, no matter how much we tried to move on. Before I could respond, a voice cut through the air. John? His smile faded, and I immediately knew who it was. I turned my head and saw her, a woman with brown hair, attentive eyes, holding a shopping bag. His wife. My stomach turned. This is my wife, Mariana. He made the introductions, as if that moment wasn't loaded with absurd tension. Honey, this is the... He hesitated, and I felt the weight of that pause. It's Sophia, my childhood friend. Friend. The bitter taste of that word stuck in my throat. Mariana smiled politely, but her eyes were scanning me carefully. A woman knows when another woman means something to her man. Ah, João already told me about you. She held out her hand. It's good to finally meet you." I did the same, even though my skin was hot, my entire body on alert. The pleasure is mine. We said goodbye soon after, but not before our eyes met one last time. João looked at me, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. I left the market with shaking hands and a tight chest, because no matter how much I tried to deny it, I still felt it. And worse, he felt it too. Now, what would we do with this? I spent the entire drive home trying to convince myself that this encounter meant nothing. João was just someone from my past, someone that life took on another path. He had a wife, an established life, and me, I was just passing through. But the truth hurt. It hurt because when I looked into his eyes, I saw everything we tried to bury resurface like a brush fire. And it hurt even more because, even after so many years, my body still remembered him. My grandmother noticed my silence when I arrived. She was always attentive to my mood swings. "Did something happen?" he asked, as I packed up the groceries. "Nothing much. I met an old friend." She arched an eyebrow suspiciously. "What kind of friend?" I sighed. My grandmother knew my story with João. She knew that when I left more than one city behind. John. His name hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning. "Ah," she let out a low sigh. "And how is he?" "Well, married." My grandmother just nodded, not saying anything, as if I knew that detail was a direct blow to my chest. That night, I tried not to think about him, but it was useless. Lying in my old bed, staring at the ceiling, memories began to flood my mind without permission. The first time we met, as kids, when he pushed me on the playground and then gave me a lollipop to make me stop crying. The first time I realized that he was not just my best friend, but someone my heart beat differently for. And the first kiss. I was 15 years old. He, 16th. We were by the lake, the same one where we spent hours talking about everything and nothing at the same time. The moon reflected off the water, and the comfortable silence between us said more than any words. "Are you really leaving?" he asked that night, looking at the horizon. "My father has already decided. Let's go at the end of the month." He was quiet for a moment, then turned to me. "I wanted you to stay." My heart jumped in my chest. "John." Before I could finish, he leaned in and kissed me, slowly, as if he wanted to memorize every detail of that moment. My skin crawled, my heart raced, and in that moment I knew I would never forget that touch. It was there that I realized I was in love, and it was there that I knew I would leave, leaving a piece of myself behind. The memory burned in me as I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. I couldn't relive it. I couldn't let myself be carried away by a feeling that no longer had a place in his life. But life has a cruel way of making us face what we try to avoid. And the next day, as if fate was playing a game with me, there was João again, this time at my front door. His look said it all. He shouldn't be there, but it was, and I shouldn't let my heart race, but he did. I didn't know what to expect when I opened the door. In my head, I imagined 1,000 possibilities, but the one that came true was the simplest and, at the same time, the most painful. João was there, in front of me, as if time had not passed, as if our friendship, our story, had never been interrupted. But there was something different in the air, something heavy. He looked at me with that familiar look, but now it held a complexity that I couldn't decipher. It was a look of longing, but also of guilt. He looked lost, as if he was trying to find the right words, but they got stuck in his throat. "Hi." The word came out low, almost like a sigh, as if he was afraid that if he said too much, he would break what was left of us. I stood there, still, breathing hard. My mind was a mess, trying to understand how we got to this point. How did we get here, where words and feelings seemed to get tangled up in a maze with no way out? "John, what are you doing here?" The question sounded firmer than I expected, and at the same time, I felt fragile, vulnerable. He hesitated for a second, then slowly approached, as if giving me space was important. I need to talk to you." His voice was tense. I knew he was fighting something, the reality of what had happened between us and what he had now. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to gather the strength to face this conversation. But I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to fit my emotions into words that didn't feel like a burden. When I opened them again, he was closer, almost within my reach, as if the mere act of being there was already an attempt to undo what had been done. "What do you need, John?" I asked, more quietly this time, almost begging him to tell me what was going on inside him. He sighed, running his hand through his hair, as he always did when he was anxious. "I don't know how to begin." He looked at the floor, as if the words were too heavy to say out loud. "I know I hurt you. I know that life has moved on, and that you have your path. But I can't forget." These words hit me like a blow. I already knew, somewhere deep inside me, that he still felt something. I knew from that first meeting in the market that what existed between us had not been erased by time. But I was not ready to hear him say it. He looked at me again, and this time his eyes were shining with something I couldn't quite identify. Despair, blame, or maybe desire. "I don't know what to do with this anymore, Sophia. I have a wife, a life, and you have your path too. But when I saw you yesterday, all I felt was emptiness, a longing for what we were, than I thought we could be." Those words pierced me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to scream that he couldn't have this back, that he had already moved on, that he couldn't come back into my heart now. But I couldn't. My voice cracked, and what was left was a pained sigh. "You made your choice, John." My voice was shaking, but I couldn't allow myself to break. Not now, not in front of him. I did mine too. He took a step forward, and that simple action made my body react in unexpected ways. Something inside me wanted to take a step back. I wanted to escape from that situation before it was too late. But there was something in my chest that pulled me towards him. Something that, no matter how much I tried to ignore, wouldn't go away. "I know," he murmured, his voice low, as if each word was a weight he didn't know how to carry. "I know I made my choice, but I can't lie to you. I can't lie to myself. I can't forget what we were." The silence between the two of us was suffocating. I could feel the words stuck, but none of them seemed enough. How could I tell him that I still loved him, that my heart still beat for him, when he had a life with another woman? How could I be selfish enough to ask him to throw it all away and come back to me? But the truth was, deep down, I still wanted it. I still loved him. And that hurt me more than anything else. He stepped closer, now barely inches away from me. I could feel the heat of his body, the familiarity of the scent I had always associated with him. Everything seemed so wrong, but at the same time, so right. "Sophia, I need you. I don't know how to live with this anymore. I don't know how to go on without you here. And it was at that moment, at that exact moment, that the wall I had built around my heart crumbled. The distance I had kept between us was gone, and I found myself, once again, at the mercy of him, of us, of what we were. The kiss happened before I could think about the consequences. He came closer, and with the softness I knew so well, touched his lips to mine. The kiss was hot, urgent, as if our souls recognized each other after so much time apart. There were no more doubts. There was no more resistance. Whatever it was between us was back, stronger than ever. But at the same time, reality hit hard. He was married. I was no longer the girl he left behind. What was between us now was a fantasy, a repressed desire, a longing that burned irrationally. And when he walked away, I knew that by taking that step, we were both trapped in something we could no longer control. The silence after the kiss was deafening. The words wouldn't form in my mind, and my body felt frozen, as if I could still feel his lips on mine. The heat of the moment still burned, but reality, hard and cold, quickly imposed itself. I knew something had changed, but the question was, what to do about it? Juon didn't move away immediately, but stood there, looking at me with an intensity that I didn't know how to deal with. His eyes were dark, filled with desire, guilt, and perhaps a kind of desperation I knew well. He seemed lost, trying to find some way out of the dilemma we had just created between the two of us. I, on the other hand, didn't even know where to start. I found myself once again torn between the love that never left and the pain it would cause, both for him and for me. My chest was tight. My hands were shaking slightly. He noticed and touched my face gently, as if he wanted to comfort me, but at the same time warn me about the consequences of all that. "Sophia, I don't know what to do." His voice was hoarse, carrying a weight he could no longer hide. "I can't go on with this emptiness inside me. I don't know how to go back now." I wanted to respond, but the words wouldn't come out. How could I explain to him what was going on in my head? How could I say that I still loved him? That passion had never disappeared, even after so many years? How could he admit that at that moment, I was willing to give everything for him again, even knowing the consequences? But there was no time for that. Reality was hitting us hard, and we couldn't ignore it any longer. He was married. He had a wife who probably already suspected our closeness. And there I was, in his life, back in his city, as if fate was mocking us both. I took a step back, away from him, as if the gesture was necessary so I could breathe. I needed space to think, to process everything that was happening. What were we doing? What were we willing to lose? "I can't go on with this, John." My voice came out firmer than I imagined, but the pain was still there, swallowing every word. "I can't be the reason you destroy everything. I'm not that person." He took a step towards me, but I held up my hand, stopping him from coming any closer. His simple touch made me lose control, and I knew that if he touched me again, I wouldn't be able to pull away. "But you are the person I always wanted, Sophia." He was speaking with a voice full of emotion, almost desperate. "I can't let you go again. Not after all this. Not after having you here, close to me." There was a raw truth in his words, a brutal honesty that made me shiver inside. I always knew he was my greatest love. I knew it from the first time I saw him, from the first stolen kiss, He was always present in my mind, in my most intimate thoughts. But now I was being dragged into a storm, and I didn't know if I could survive it. I needed to be strong. I needed to remember who I was now. I was no longer the sweet, naive girl he left behind. I was a grown woman with her own dreams, with her own path, and no matter how much he meant to me, I couldn't put all that at risk. You have a wife, John. My voice was shaking, but my decision was forming more clearly with each word I said. You made a choice, and I can't be the reason you break it. He shook his head, as if in denial, as if he didn't want to accept the truth I was telling him. I know my life has changed, Sophia. I know I made choices, but you are still a part of me. It always was. How can I ignore this? How can I live with this emptiness now that you're back? The pain in his words was undeniable, but there was also a certain anguish that I couldn't ignore. I knew he was struggling with something much deeper than just physical attraction. There were feelings, memories, lost dreams that were coming to the surface with devastating intensity. But at the same time, I knew he had a responsibility. He couldn't just abandon everything and everyone because of something we both knew couldn't be. I looked at him, feeling a lump form in my throat. The words were stuck, and I didn't know how to get them out without breaking down completely. But I needed to be honest. He needed to put an end to this before it was too late for both of them. John, you have a life. You have a wife. I'm not the person you can use to run away from what you have now. I am the Sophia I used to be, but I am also someone different. And as much as there is still something between us, I can't be the reason you break everything you've built. I can't be the other one. He seemed to wilt, as if the words had hit him with unexpected force. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to compose himself, but I saw the struggle in his eyes. He was torn, and it broke me in a way I didn't know how to deal with. So what do you want me to do, Sophia? His question sounded more like a sigh, a surrender. How can I move on knowing that you were always what I wanted most? How to live with this? I took a deep breath, feeling a crushing weight on my chest. I don't know, John. I don't know what you're going to do, but I know what I need to do. I need to move on, and as much as it burns me, as much as it hurts me, I need to leave, so you can find the peace I cannot give you. He didn't say anything else. I stood there, looking at him, seeing the pain in his eyes, feeling my own soul shatter, but knowing it was what was best for both of us. I needed to let him go, like he had let me go years ago. And with one last look, I turned and walked into the house, leaving behind what we could have been, but would never be. The house was silent as I closed the door behind me. The echo of the closing seemed to be a signal that the story between us had finally come to an end. But inside me, the void he left felt deeper, more painful than anything I had ever experienced. I knew I had made the right choice, but the weight of being responsible for that decision crushed me with every second. I spent the rest of the night pacing around the house, not really knowing what to do with myself. The pain was real, but there was also a sense that I had lost something much bigger than him. It wasn't just love I was leaving behind. It was the idea of a whole life I would never have. Everything we had lived together, all the unspoken promises, all the shared memories, were fading away like smoke in the wind. And there I was, again, alone. What hurt me the most wasn't the fact that he got married. nor the fact that we were in different worlds now. No, what hurt me was knowing that he had carried a part of me all these years, just as I had carried a part of him. But in the end, we both went our separate ways, with invisible scars. I knew somehow he still wanted me. I knew he felt the same emptiness I did, but we couldn't be what we wanted for each other. The love we shared in the past, with all its intensity, no longer fit into the life he had built. I threw myself on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Fatigue was taking over me, but the thought of everything that had happened in the last few weeks kept me awake. The memory of the first kiss, of how the chemistry between us never disappeared, the warmth of his touch, the moments of passion and surrender, all of this was still engraved on my skin, like an indelible mark. I wondered what would have happened if we hadn't separated, and the pain was unbearable because I knew deep down that no matter what had happened, he had already made his decisions. He had already moved on. The morning light arrived without mercy, as if the world kept turning, even though inside I was paralyzed. But it was the morning that brought me a new reality. There was no turning back. I knew he would be busy with his life, with his wife, with the commitments he had. And me? I would stay here, trying to rebuild my life from what was left. The city seemed different, stranger. It was as if the place I grew up in had transformed, and I no longer knew how to fit in. I decided I would spend the day outside, try to distract my mind, do something productive so I wouldn't torture myself. I walked through the old streets of the city, with memories of Jerome haunting me like shadows. Every corner, every tree, every building seemed to have a piece of us there. But I couldn't allow myself to get stuck in this any longer. I knew he needed space to live his life, and I needed to find a way to live mine. I spent the whole day trying to keep myself busy, but thoughts of him kept invading me. I knew he was somewhere around there, maybe at home with her. Maybe he had already returned to his routine, as if nothing had happened, as if nothing between us had been renewed. It made me feel a pang of envy, a silent anger that I didn't know where it came from, but that seemed to be welling up from deep within me. Why did his life move forward so easily, while mine seemed to have stagnated? I knew I needed to move on, but there was something in me that still pulled me back to him. Something I couldn't understand. Something that, no matter how much I tried to fight it, was still there. It was as if the mere sight of him again had transported me back to the past, to the time when we were inseparable. As if everything that happened in the last few years was some kind of illusion. But it was reality I had to face now, not what we could have been. I went to the hospital in the afternoon. I had a visit with a sick relative, and that distracted me for a while. When I finished my visit and was about to leave, my phone rang. I saw his name on the screen. My heart jumped into my throat. My stomach turned, and for a second, all I wanted to do was answer the phone and hear his voice. But at the same time, I knew it was the last thing I should do. I knew that would only drag me further into an endless spiral. I looked at my phone, undecided. The urge to talk to him was overwhelming, but reason told me it wasn't right. I took a deep breath and hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the decision weigh down on me. I needed to be strong. I needed to let him live his life without my shadow. The rest of the week passed in a blur. I was busy, but my mind kept going back to him. Sometimes I found myself wondering what he was doing, if he was happy with her. if he thought of me the way I thought of him. But these thoughts were dangerous. They would lead to nothing. I needed to keep my distance, because that's what he needed, even if I wanted otherwise. The next night, as I walked down the street to my apartment, I saw a familiar silhouette in the distance. My heart stopped for a moment. It was him. Juan was there, standing in front of the square, where we used to meet so often. He saw me before I had a chance to look away, and for a moment, the world stopped. Memories flooded my mind, and all I wanted to do was run to him, hug him, make it all come back. But I knew I couldn't. He looked at me, and I could see the conflict in his gaze. He wanted to come closer, but he seemed to hesitate. I was hesitant too, but I knew we couldn't afford another encounter like that. He had already made his choice. I kept walking without looking back, with the weight of his presence still very strong within me. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. Just the silence between us, which was more painful than any words. Silence dragged on for days. I knew he missed me as much as I did, but the distance between us now seemed greater than ever. He was there, with her, with his life built around a decision that no longer involved me. And I, on the other hand, was here, trying to understand the mess that the reunion had made in my heart. What united us had been so strong, so intense, that it seemed impossible to simply erase it. But I knew I couldn't continue living in this limbo. There were days when longing invaded me in an overwhelming way. It was almost as if a part of me still lived in that old life I shared with him, and another part was desperately trying to move on. I couldn't forget the stolen kisses on warm summer nights, the laughter shared during rainy afternoons, the secrets we shared in those moments when it was just the two of us, immune to everything around us. How does life separate us from something so pure and real? How, from one day to the next, does it become a memory, a blurred photograph of a time that would never return? I went to visit him once more, not really expecting to see John, but hoping that at least he would be close enough to hear me. I didn't want to ask any more questions. I didn't want to know what he felt, but I wanted him to know what I felt, what was left of me after the goodbye that never happened. I arrived at his house late at night. The street was quiet, the moon illuminating the facades of the houses. When I rang the doorbell, a feeling of unease washed over me. Maybe it was the fear of meeting his wife. Maybe it was the fear of seeing him so far away from me that it would hurt more than I was ready to face. Time seemed to have frozen when he answered the door. Juan was there, with messy hair, tired eyes, but with that smile that never failed to melt me. "Hi." His voice was soft, almost like it was a whisper of something very ancient. "Hello," I replied, trying to maintain control, but the tension in the air was palpable. He hesitated for a moment, looking at me as if seeing me for the first time in years. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, and I didn't know what to say. I knew I needed to be strong, that I shouldn't relive what couldn't be, but the urge to say everything that was pent up inside me, to confess how much I still wanted him, was irresistible. "Are you well?" he asked, a tone of concern in his voice. It was as if he was looking for a way to break the ice, to get back to what was familiar, to what was left of us. "I am. Yes. I needed to see you." The words came out without me planning them. It was the truth, but it wasn't everything. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to say that I missed our life together, the way he made me feel, but I couldn't. I knew I shouldn't. He took a step back, inviting me in. I hesitated for a second, but something inside me urged me to enter. Maybe it was the desire to see again the place that had marked so many moments, the place that we once considered ours. As we walked into the living room, my heart was pounding wildly. The house was silent, lacking the energy it usually had when we were together. It was strange, empty, as if time had stopped there too. I've thought a lot about you, about us. His voice was low, but the words were filled with an emotion that made me shiver. I wanted to believe that he still had feelings for me, but I knew I couldn't let myself be fooled. His love for her would not fade so easily. I sat on the couch, trying to look calm, but my mind was in a huge mess. He sat down next to me, but the distance between us seemed immense. It was no longer the same closeness as before, the silent complicity that we shared. Are you happy?" I asked, and my words came out with more difficulty than I expected. I knew I was putting myself in a risky situation, but I didn't know how to stay away from him anymore. Not after everything we had been through. He sighed and ran his hand over his face, as if weighing the words he would choose. There was something about it, something that felt like it had broken. Maybe it was the pain of knowing he could never go back, or maybe it was the guilt, the feeling that he had chosen a path he could never deviate from. I don't know. He looked at me, his eyes looking more vulnerable than ever. When you left, I thought things would be easier. I thought I could move on, build my life. And I did it. But I could never stop thinking about you. Not the way I should. Those words, spoken so openly, hit me like a punch in the gut. He was saying what I felt too, but the pain it brought didn't give me any relief. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. He was there, married, with another life, with another person. What was left of us was an unconsummated love, a love that could not be more. But at that moment, I understood that even though fate had separated us, the love we both shared was still present. In every unspoken word, in every furtive glance, the passion still burned between us, silent and painful. I knew we couldn't be what we dreamed of, but the flame would never go out completely. "John," I tried to speak, but he interrupted me, placing his hand gently over mine. "You don't need to say anything, please." His voice was low, hoarse. "Not now, not after all." There was something final in his tone, something that told me he, too, knew we couldn't turn back. His life had changed, and so had mine. But somehow, he would remain a part of me, and I, a part of him. The conversation dragged on into the night, but we couldn't say anything that hadn't already been said. It was a love that could not be, and that was what made it so painful. As I stood up to leave, our eyes met one last time. I knew it wasn't a final goodbye, but it was a necessary goodbye. I left his house with a heavy heart, but a part of me felt like this was what we had now. A lost love, but eternally kept. The next morning arrived without me having found peace the night before. The weight of longing, loss, and the choice we both made still haunted me, like a shadow that no longer knew how to dissipate. I knew that when I left his house, something inside me had changed forever, but more than ever, I realized that this cycle had closed, and perhaps the only way to move forward was to truly leave behind what could no longer be. I walked through the streets of the city, that same small town that I knew so well, where memories seemed to appear on every corner, in every building, in every tree. The chilly morning wind made my hair dance around my face, and I couldn't help but wonder how many other people walked around, carrying such a heavy weight in their hearts. I wasn't the only one who kept secrets, lost loves, choices made. But at that moment, it felt like my pain was unique. I spent the rest of the day trying to occupy myself, trying to convince myself that what had happened was no longer relevant. I didn't want to relive those moments anymore. I no longer wanted to be the person who allowed themselves to wallow in nostalgia and what-ifs. Not after all. But I couldn't stop my mind from returning to him, to the touch of his lips, to the warmth of his presence, to the feeling of belonging to that world once again. That night, however, brought a surprise. When the doorbell rang, I didn't expect to find anyone, especially him. But it was him, John. There he was, at my door, with a determined look in his eyes, as if he knew that nothing could be postponed any longer. "You shouldn't be here." I tried to remain calm, but my voice cracked. I knew that whatever he was going to say now could be the definitive end of whatever was left between us. Or maybe it was the last attempt to resolve something that was never resolved. He smiled, but his smile was heavy. Something in him had changed, and that only made me more certain that he, too, knew we no longer had a choice. We had reached the limit. He looked at me, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "I know." He spoke softly, as if admitting a failure, a defeat, or maybe just the fact that he could no longer live with indecision. "But I can't leave without doing this." I watched him, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what he had in mind. Was he asking for one last chance? Did he want to go back after all? I wanted to believe so. I wanted him to say that it could be the two of us, that it could be like before. But my heart was cautious. I knew it wouldn't be that simple. He took a step forward, closer to me. I could feel the tension in the air, the electricity that was still there between us, the chemistry that never dissipated. His eyes were so close to mine that I could hear the rapid rhythm of his breathing. I wanted to resist. I wanted to take a step back, say we couldn't go down this path anymore. But when he finally touched me, I knew there was no turning back. "I don't know if we can go back to being who we were," he said, his voice hoarse, a mixture of frustration and regret. "But what I know, what I feel, is that I can't go on without knowing what could be, without knowing what would happen if we really tried." I took a deep breath, my heart racing. Every word he said seemed to touch a raw nerve, a wound that never healed, a story I couldn't forget. But at the same time, there was a part of me that wanted to believe, that wanted to give in to that last breath of a love that had not been fully lived. He moved closer, and before I could resist, he kissed me. The kiss that felt like an explosion, a confirmation of everything we had lived, but also a silent goodbye to everything that could not be. The taste of him, the feeling of having him in my arms, it all felt so right, and yet so wrong. What were we doing? We couldn't be this couple anymore. We couldn't be what we were before. When he pulled away, still holding my hand, our eyes met again. This time, there were no words. There was nothing more to be said. What was left of us no longer fit into our current lives. It was an old story, and we both knew it. The love was still there, alive, but now there was a distance between us that couldn't be ignored. I can't stay," he spoke, his voice almost imperceptible. "I love her, but God, I still love you. But that won't work anymore. I can't give you what you need. I can't give you the freedom you deserve." I could only nod, my throat tight, my words stuck. What else could we say? I knew, more than ever, that he had made his choice. He was there, in front of me, but he no longer belonged to me. And as much as I still loved him, I also knew that the only way to move on was to let him go. He gave me one last look, a look loaded with unspoken meaning, and then turned, walking toward the door. His every step seemed to weigh on me, every movement pushing us further apart. And so, he left my life for good, not because I didn't love him anymore, but because the love between us no longer fit into our lives. I stood there, staring at the closed door behind him, feeling the emptiness. But at the same time, something inside me began to heal. It was the end, but it was also the beginning of something new. I knew that João's love would never be forgotten, but I also knew that my life could no longer be a shadow of what had already passed. I was more than that, more than an interrupted story. The longing was still there, like a distant echo. But now, she no longer had the power to hold me back. The future, however uncertain, was beginning to open up before me, and I was ready to live, to move on, to rebuild myself. The love we once had was real, and it would always be a part of me. But in the end, I learned that the greatest proof of love is knowing when it's time to let go.